I'm going to show you the latest and a really cringeworthy interview by Tom Perez. This was a reporter, I believe, from the Associated Press. New York Times. Tara Reade canceled her interview with Fox News, claiming that she was getting death threats. Her and her child were getting death threats. I don't have any reason not to believe that, seeing the venom that is on Twitter right now and has been in the last few days aimed against her. Then the Associated Press, which frankly seemed like they wrote whatever the Biden campaign fed them, again, talking points to try and discredit her. First, they put out a headline, Tara Reade did not, sexual assault or sexual harassment not mentioned in Biden complaint. Then Tara Reade tweeted out, this is false. Then they changed it to, I didn't use sexual harassment in Biden complaint. What this story is trying to do is basically frame it. And again, this to me, because I've worked in media, this, how it works, the campaigns, the politicians, the spin artists around them feed the journalist whatever the framing they want, and the journalists dutifully repeat it. So what they're trying to do is basically make it so if she didn't use the actual term sexual harassment in a complaint, then it discredits her. Even though, by her account, what she described is sexual harassment if the complaint exists and if she described this. Right. I remember talking about him wanting me to serve drinks because he liked my legs and thought I was pretty and it made me uncomfortable. I know that I was too scared to write about the sexual assault. So Ryan Grimm, who broke major parts of this story early on, tweeted out, this is consistent with what she told me and others about the complaint. Ryan McHugh, who wrote for Business Insider about the neighbor who corroborated that Tara Reade had told her about this alleged assault in 1995, 2 years after it presumably happened. This is consistent with what she told me about the complaint as well. So the Associated Press reported this as some big oh, we got her. She didn't actually, in the complaint, she didn't say anything about assault or sexual harassment using the quotes sexual harassment. Okay, but what does it matter if she used the term sexual harassment? It's the sentiment of what she was saying made her uncomfortable. By the way, even she had said, I didn't bring up the sexual assault then. I brought up things he was doing that made me uncomfortable. She didn't use the phrase sexual harassment. It doesn't discredit that she might have written a complaint and talked about Biden basically saying things that objectified her. So this is the kind of gotcha attempts to discredit her by essentially moving the goalposts and putting in things that she never said she said. She never said, I said it was sexual harassment, almost as a way to show she's lying. So let me show you profile and encourage Tom Perez leading with his values on this.
I want to start with Joe Biden did have days to prepare for his interview about Tara Reade. He denied the allegations and urged the National Archives to release any alleged complaint from Tara Reade. But the archives said they are not responsible for records like that. Biden now says in a formal letter that he was mistaken, that it was at the archives, and asked the Secretary of the Senate for help.
Mm-hmm. Joe Biden has been very clear, Martha, that this did not happen. He was forceful in that, and he's been equally clear that when women come forward with complaints of this nature, they should be taken seriously. Their complaints should be investigated. They should be treated with dignity, and he's done exactly that. He called for the Senate to release any documents they have. She indicated that she filed a complaint. Joe Biden wants that complaint released. He is an open book. He understands that it's important for the information to get out.
But Mr. Perez, I want to stop you right there. Biden also says he will not release documents from his years in the Senate, now at the University of Delaware, because they don't contain personnel matters. And he kind of brushed aside suggestions that a search be done of just Tara Reade's name in those documents. The New York Times editorial board called for the DNC to convene an unbiased, apolitical panel to review portions of Biden's papers, saying his word is insufficient to dispel the cloud. Your communications director has called that idea absurd. Why?
Well, listen, there's been so many investigations of the vice president. The most comprehensive investigation of the vice president was when he was vetted by Barack Obama in 2008. I'm very familiar with vice presidential vetting process. They look at everything about you. They looked at the entire history of Joe Biden, his entire career. And I'll tell you, if Barack Obama had any indication that there was an issue, Barack Obama would not have had him as his vice president. Barack Obama trusted Joe Biden. I trust Joe Biden. And those investigations have been done. Now, let's talk about Delaware for a moment. The University of Delaware, and any university that takes somebody's documents, they're taking their policy documents, they're taking their speeches, they're not taking their personnel records. And in fact,
but why not just search Tara Reade in those documents?
This is like the Hillary emails, because there was nothing there. And the reason is, if I'm going, I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1995. The ranking member was Joe Biden. I wasn't working for Joe Biden, I was working for Senator Kennedy. If you want to see my personnel records, you don't go to the Kennedy Institute. That's not where they go. And so when you ask the University of Delaware to take a look at something, you're asking them to look for something that doesn't exist. And the fact of the matter is that the President of the United States, the former President, Barack Obama, conducted an exhaustive search.
And that was 2008.
Open book.
Again, I don't have a lot of high standards for cable news shows. That was relatively grilling Tom Perez. But the obvious question, if it's not there, what was Biden campaign operatives looking through? The Business Insider reported they went to the University of Delaware and they looked through his records. If it's such a certainty that there's no personnel records there, what were they doing? Smoking a doobie in the closet at University of Delaware? Opening boxes? It's laughable. And by the way, we've already played this game because Biden, during his Morning Joe interview, had said it would be at the National Archives. The National Archives said we don't have personnel files; they would be at the University of Delaware. So it's like it's like these cases where the state blames the city blames the state, or you call one doctor and they say no, you got to call this office. You call that office, they tell you no, you got to call the original office you called. Well, if it's definitely not at the University of Delaware, what's the big deal with allowing, by the way, it's laughable that the New York Times is calling for the DNC, which at this point, I think is a criminal enterprise. The DNC will appoint neutral arbiters to go check this out? No. I'm not letting the police investigate itself. The whole thing is laughable. Biden campaign did not dispute Business Insider that they already sent officials and operatives there, potentially as recently as March. So around the same time that Tara Reade was doing the interview with Katie Halper at first. Nobody has an explanation for what were they doing there. If zero personnel records exist at the University of Delaware, why were his campaign operatives sent there? But again, as I said in the beginning, it doesn't even matter if they find the complaint, because he's just going to, they'll move the goalposts further. Oh, well, the Obama administration, the Obama campaign didn't, vetting doesn't include going through nearly 2,000 boxes at the University of Delaware. So yeah, they might have missed this. And oh, maybe she made a complaint, and maybe Joe might have made a comment offhand that made her uncomfortable. But that was, almost 30 years ago. Times were different, and the vice president apologizes if he ever made any comments to her or anyone else. They'll move the goalposts, even if a complaint is found, because they don't care if Joe Biden pushed her against the wall or anyone else. Here's what they care about: the two options. They care about defeating Donald Trump so that they could have a Democrat in power, and they care about making sure progressive never gets in power, because it's all about the money. I give you this story. Perfect example. Organizers for the 2020 Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee spend nearly $4 million in 9 months, up 15% from 2016. Newly filed federal records show the DNC Convention Committee has already spent more than $3.9 million doing prep work for the national event since July 2019. That's up by some $500,000 over what the committee spent during the same nine-month period in the run-up to the 2016 Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, a 15% increase in expenditures. March was one of the busiest months by far for the DNC Convention Committee, which paid out more than $870,000 on planning, payroll, and consulting. Because consultants got to make their money. And most of those consultants are also CNN contributors. No conflict of interest there. So this is what it's all about. It's keeping the money. Oh, if Joe Biden did some bad things towards women, well, Trump is worse. And by the way, Trump has done awful things. There's enough allegations against Trump to know he's done wrong. He's done reprehensible things when it comes to women. I think when you have 14 to 20 allegations, they're not all lying, even though the media has let Donald Trump off the hook in regards to that. But it doesn't matter at this point if they find a complaint she made. They will change the discussion. They will move the goalpost. It doesn't even matter at this point. I think if another 2 or 3 women come out, they'll call it a Republican operation. They'll say it's the Republicans with the Bernie Bros, because they don't care. They don't care about protecting women, maybe on the margins. But if protecting women means having to sacrifice power, having to sacrifice the money train, Kirsten Gillibrand, she just showed it. And by the way, if you don't think Tom Perez and all these other people coming out saying Joe Biden has already been vetted, go ask Obama and his campaign, which David Axelrod, who is Obama's senior advisor, put that out on Twitter. That's called coordinated talking points, because this response, which is aimed to smear Tara Reade, is a political operation. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com, where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.